Okay, it looks like it's 9 o'clock, so we are ready to get started. Thank you all for joining us for this morning's Pennsylvania School Breakfast Expansion Grant informational webinar. I'm Elaine McDonald, Director of Project PA at Penn State and co-project director along with Jenny Edmondson from the Pennsylvania Department of Education on this School Breakfast Expansion Grant project. And I'll be turning it over to Jenny shortly. Just a few reminders. Please use the Q&A box to submit any questions that you have. We'll likely save those questions until the end of the webinar. The slides from today's webinar, along with a FAQ document, will be available on the Project PA website within about 48 hours. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording of the webinar will also be available at that time. And with that, I will turn it over to Jenny.
Thanks, Elaine. Good morning, everyone. I'm gonna just wanted to say hello with my screen on, but I'm gonna go ahead and turn it off just to maximize the bandwidth, and hopefully everyone will hear me okay and be able to see the slides okay. So thank you again for joining us today, and certainly for your interest in expanding school breakfast through Pennsylvania School Breakfast Expansion Grants. The funding for Pennsylvania's School Breakfast Expansion, or SBE, grants was provided through a USDA School Breakfast Expansion grant. And Pennsylvania was one of 3 states that received this funding. So it's been really exciting to be able to offer this opportunity to schools in Pennsylvania. As some of you may know, this is actually our 3rd and final round of funding that we're going to be able to offer through this grant opportunity. The grant program is administered through a partnership between the Pennsylvania Department of Education, Bureau of Food and Nutrition, in collaboration with Penn State, and we call that collaboration Project PA. Elaine and I are the project co-directors, and of course we've provided our emails here for you. They're also at the end of the presentation in case you have any further questions after the webinar and after reviewing that FAQ document that Elaine mentioned we'll post on the website. Please do read through that when it's posted if you have questions, because it's likely that it may answer most of the questions that you have. USDA has specific requirements for determining the schools that are qualified and those that are given priority for an SBE grant. For schools to qualify for school breakfast expansion funding, they must participate in the National School Lunch Program, and they must be eligible for severe need breakfast reimbursement rates. USDA also requires that priority for SBE funding be given to schools in which at least 75% of students are eligible for free or reduced price meals. And for determining the priority schools, eligibility from the October 2023 claim was used. On September 4th, school food authorities received an email from PDE informing them that one or more of their school buildings meets USDA's eligibility requirement to apply for school breakfast expansion grant funding. I'm sure most of you have seen the Excel file that has that list of qualifying schools and the priority schools, which we have posted on the grant application website, which is at projectpa.org. Make sure that you check both tabs on that Excel spreadsheet. There are 2. One of them lists all the qualifying schools, and then the other one lists the priority schools. The other thing you're going to notice is that there are a lot of schools on these lists, but we do not want this to discourage you from applying. Although the lists are long, because there's a limit on how much funding can be provided per SFA, which I'll describe shortly, not all of these schools can apply. And you might also be wondering if you have any chance of receiving a grant award if your school is a qualifying school, but not a priority school. Well, what we can tell you is that in the first 2 rounds of SBE funding, 40% of grants were awarded to schools that were not priority schools. So we encourage all qualifying schools that are interested in expanding school breakfast and improving the nutrition of breakfast meals to apply for this opportunity. Up to $10,000 per school food authority is available to be awarded in round 3 to achieve 2 objectives in awarded schools. The first objective is to make significant and sustainable changes to increase participation in the school breakfast program. For your projects, schools are strongly encouraged to implement or expand an existing alternative breakfast service method in the school. And this is because alternative service methods are known to increase student participation in school breakfast. An alternative service method is any service method where breakfast is made more accessible to the students, and the students are not limited to obtaining and eating the meal in the cafeteria. Examples can include breakfast in the classroom, grab and go from a hallway cart or kiosk, second chance breakfast, or a combination of these. The second grant objective is to make significant and sustainable changes to improve the nutritional value of school breakfast. This grant objective aims not only to make breakfast more appealing to students, but also to better position schools to meet regulatory changes to the school nutrition program's nutrition standards that are being phased in over the next several school years. As most of you probably know, USDA's final rule became effective July 1st of this year, and it gradually phases in changes, things like added sugars limits, sodium reduction, and some other meal pattern updates. So for this objective, schools can use strategies such as reducing prepackaged items that are high in sugar or sodium, serving more protein sources, fresh produce, whole grains, or offering more hot foods and incorporating new scratch or speed scratch menu items for healthy, nutritious, and appealing meals that entice more students to want to participate in school breakfast. Funds will be used to expand, meaning increase participation in an existing school breakfast program, or to initiate the school breakfast program in a school that currently does not operate school breakfast. The grant awards will range from $5,000 to $10,000 per school. It's important to note that applications with budgets less than $10,000 will not be considered. $5,000 is the minimum grant award that you can request because grant funds are really intended to be used to make significant and sustainable changes to increase participation and improve nutrition in school breakfast. Because of USDA funding limits, no more than $10,000 will be awarded per SFA. So what does this look like? Well, if an SFA has more than one qualifying school, the SFA may choose to apply for either 1 or 2 schools that qualify. Schools have asked us in the past if they must adjust their budgets so that they do not go over the USDA limit. Do they have to make it be exactly $5,000 if they're applying for 2, or exactly $10,000 if they're applying for 1 school? So SFAs may submit an application for 1 school with a budget exceeding $10,000, or applications for 2 qualifying schools with combined budgets exceeding $10,000. What we do ask is that you note within the application or applications that the school food authority understands that if awarded, no more than $10,000 will be provided, and that the SFA will cover the additional costs that are needed to implement your projects. Grant applications are due on October 18th by 5 p.m., and we expect to announce the grant awards on October 30th. The project timeframe runs from November 1st, 2024 through the end of this school year, which ends June 30th, 2025. So what can SBE grant funding be used for? Allowable expenses include, but are not limited to, equipment that is needed for alternative breakfast service methods. This is going to be things like mobile carts, kiosks, iPads for wireless point of service, insulated bags to transport food. Another thing could be small kitchen equipment to improve school breakfast quality. Examples could be smoothie making equipment, new chef knives or knife sharpeners, fresh fruit slicer. Food and supplies used for taste testing is an allowable expense. Printing costs and promotional materials are allowable. Also, costs needed incurred for doing training of your staff. And more broadly, costs that are associated with educating stakeholders in your awarded schools about the importance of school breakfast, about the new breakfast service method that you are going to be implementing, or the nutritional value of school breakfast. Finally, short-term labor costs are another example of allowable funds, allowable use of funds. I want to just take a moment to clarify what we mean by short-term labor costs. Short-term labor costs are costs that are needed during the startup phase of the project and are not an ongoing cost. Examples include costs for staff to participate in training or to learn how to implement a new breakfast service method or a culinary training to identify new breakfast recipes or preparation methods. Another example could be costs for staff to be involved in taste testing activities to assess student preferences for breakfast items. Labor costs for staff to be involved in routine activities such as serving breakfast that extend beyond the time frame of the grant are not considered short-term labor costs. We've been asked by schools if disposable supplies like grab-and-go bags or cups for smoothies are allowable grant expenses. So we actually forwarded this question to USDA, and they said that although disposable items can be an allowable expense, that they advise grant applicants to consider if this is the most impactful use of grant funds and not simply a way to maintain current operation. Applicants need to justify how the disposable items relate to the grant objectives, which again are to increase participation in school breakfast and improve the nutritional quality of school breakfast meals in a significant and sustainable way. So, for example, colorful grab-and-go bags for a special kickoff event could create excitement and generate interest in the breakfast program and increase participation. Applicants must also consider how the costs will be sustained beyond the grant timeframe. And remember that grant funds may only be used for items related to school breakfast. So if the school plans to use funds to purchase disposable supplies, they need to have a system in place to monitor that the supplies are only used for school breakfast and not for school lunch or any other purpose. Unallowable expenses for the grant include, but are not limited to, non-reimbursable breakfast food item expenses. For example, coffee is not a meal component, and coffee machines are not an allowable use of grant funds. Food that is part of the reimbursable school breakfast program meal is also not an allowable expense. You are already receiving reimbursement for that through the program. Schools also may not include expenses that were incurred before the grant period begins or after the grant ends. So for example, if your school purchased a fresh fruit slicer last month, you cannot include that expense as part of your budget because that cost was incurred before the grant began. Another example, schools that purchased a software license for mobile point of service at their hallway carts can only include the prorated cost of the software license during the grant period. Schools that are awarded an SBE grant do have to meet several requirements. They do need to participate in a webinar about improving the nutritional quality of school meals. The webinar is planned for November, sometime after the grant awards are announced and the grant period begins. You'll need to complete an online registration to be approved to receive payments from Penn State University. This is how the grant funds will be dispersed to SFAs. So this is very important, obviously, to get done. Awarded schools also must enter a one-week cycle menu of school breakfast menus into Primero Edge, and that's going to be used for the nutrient analysis. We're going to do this twice, so you'll have to enter a one-week breakfast menu that was served at your awarded school prior to project initiation, and then again at the end of the project, at the project's completion. And this is how we're going to look at changes that were made in your menu to make it more nutritious and more appealing to students. You, of course, will need to implement the plan that you described in your approved proposal and participate in 2 check-in calls. This is, we will plan these most likely sometime in late January and in May of 2025 for this round. And then there will be a final report that you'll need to submit, which will be due July 31st, 2025. The application includes 9 questions and a signature page. The first 2 questions are simple checkboxes where you indicate the breakfast program service methods currently used at the school and the breakfast program service methods to be implemented or expanded at the school under the grant. The next few questions ask you to describe how the breakfast program service model will be implemented or expanded at the school and what meal counting method will be used to ensure that students receive only 1 reimbursable breakfast. You will describe the plan for improving the nutritional quality of school breakfast meals. This, again, could include offering menu items with less sugar and sodium, offering more protein sources, and reducing prepackaged items. Maybe you plan to train your staff on some new scratch or speed scratch menu items to taste test with students before including them on the breakfast menu. Or perhaps your project includes starting a smoothie program to make in-house smoothies. You will also briefly describe how you plan to communicate about the importance of school breakfast to the school community and how the school administration, such as your superintendent and the building principal, will support the implementation or expansion of the breakfast service model through things like communication with family, students, and staff, and by modeling their support for school breakfast. The final sections include a timeline for implementing your chosen breakfast service model and improving the nutritional quality of school breakfast, and an itemized budget. It's important that your budget only includes items that are mentioned within the plan described in your application. And then finally, at the end, there's a signature page, which must be signed by the food service director, the school building principal, and the chief administrator. The application is open on the grant website at Project PA, and you'll find that you'll find the grant website by going to projectpa.org and clicking on the link to view more about the school or about the Pennsylvania School Breakfast Expansion Grants. And I have a snip of that there on the slide. As Elaine mentioned, these slides and the FAQ document will be posted, should be there within 2 days after this webinar is completed. The application is due by 5 p.m. on October 18th, 2024. Please note that this is a strict deadline. We recommend that schools submit prior to the due date to avoid last-minute issues such as internet problems or technical difficulties. Also, the application form is a fillable PDF, so you'll want to download a copy of it to your computer, and that will allow you to save your progress as you work on the application. Once the application is completed and signed, you can then email it to elainem@psu.edu, and that, of course, is on the application itself where you need to email it. So a few tips we have for applying. Meet with your school administration about your plans before you apply. For alternative breakfast service, meal service to be successful, getting buy-in from your stakeholders, including superintendent, the building principal, your classroom teachers and custodial staff, and of course your food service staff, is really key. Also, consider what your needs are for staffing, operations, ordering of food and supplies, and communicating and marketing your new service model and menu changes that you're going to be making to your students, your families, your school staff. Keep the grant timeframe in mind as you formulate your implementation plan. As I mentioned, the timeframe is November 1st, 2024 through June 30th, 2025. And we encourage schools that are awarded to plan to place orders for equipment and supplies as early as possible to account for shipping and delivery time, to ensure plenty of time to actually implement your projects. As mentioned earlier, expenditures for the grant, such as equipment and supplies you purchase with grant funds, do need to be made within the time frame of the grant. Because schools are strongly encouraged to implement or expand an existing alternative breakfast meal service method as part of this grant, we want to take a moment to provide some background on some meal service models that schools have been successful with. The traditional school breakfast program that is served and eaten before the bell in the cafeteria often misses too many students. And even now, with free breakfast available to all students in Pennsylvania, there are still barriers. Buses can arrive late. The cafeteria might be located too far from the student's homeroom or from where the buses drop off students in the morning. Some students don't want to miss out on that social time with friends before the bell rings, or they simply aren't hungry that early in the day, so they skip breakfast. Strategies that make breakfast part of the school day, especially ones that move breakfast out of the cafeteria and into the classroom, are the most successful at improving students' access to meals. Examples of alternative service methods include breakfast in the classroom, where the meal is served and eaten in the classroom, grab and go breakfast, which can be served from the cafeteria or from hallway carts or kiosks or other locations in the school where large groups of students can be reached, and then eaten in the classroom or other locations permitted by the school. And second chance breakfast, where breakfast is offered for an extended period or during a mid-morning break after first period to serve students who either arrive late or who simply aren't hungry for breakfast when they first arrive at school. Second chance breakfast can be offered as grab and go or as traditional service in the cafeteria and tends to be most popular with high school students. Administrators and teachers sometimes worry that allowing students to eat in the classroom will cut into instructional time. An important point when talking with school administrators and teachers is that the time students are eating in the classroom during homeroom or during classroom instruction counts as instructional time in Pennsylvania. And you can find this information right on PDE's public website. There are also many excellent resources available on how to decide which alternative method might work best in your school. There's implementation guidance out there and a lot of best practices, so you're not reinventing the wheel or starting from scratch. Actually, last fall, PDE presented webinars on alternative service methods, and those slides are available on PAIRS download forms at PDE SNP 45034. That's the document number for those of you who use PAIRS download forms. If for some reason, if you're from a food service management company and can't easily get that, I mean, you should be able to get it obviously from your sponsor, but you can reach out to me and I can send you a copy of those slides as well. There's also a clearinghouse of breakfast resources right on the Project PA website under the breakfast dropdown at the top of the homepage. So before we move on to your questions today, we wanted to walk through a few common questions that we receive first. So the first one is, what if we don't have a breakfast program in a qualifying school and want to apply for a grant. So qualified schools that do not currently operate the school breakfast program absolutely can apply for this grant. They should go into CN Pairs and get approval to operate the school breakfast program by December 1st, 2024 on the applicable site applications. And just keep in mind, because this school is starting a new breakfast program, it will be especially important to consider your needs for staffing, operations, your ordering of food and supplies, and marketing so that you're ready to begin breakfast meal service. Next question is, are schools with a food service management company contract eligible for funding? And yes, the FSMCs are eligible for funding. Just note that schools that currently do not offer school breakfast and that want to use SBE grant funding to initiate the school breakfast program will want to review their FSMC contract in case there are any changes or amendments that might be necessary to add the breakfast program to the contract. And as always, questions that are related to the FSMC contract should go to the resource email account, which is ra-fsmc@pa.gov. What are the requirements for the signatures from the food service director, the building principal, and the superintendent on the grant application? So as I mentioned earlier, on the final page of the application, contact information and signatures from these 3 individuals is required. So you have a few options. Once the application is complete, including all of the fields on that signature page except for the signature block, the actual line where the signature goes, you can go ahead and print out the completed application and have each person sign the hard copy in ink. You can then scan and email that to the email address provided on the application. Please be sure, if you're sending a scanned application, that the scan is clear and all the text is legible. If your SFA has the Adobe software, you are welcome to utilize the e-sign function to collect validated signatures through DocuSign. We don't require that, but that is certainly a valid way to do it. The last option is to have each individual sign in Adobe using their computer mouse to draw their signature. So we're asking for signatures and not just typing in the person's name. So I have a little picture of the icon here, and if my computer cooperates with me, I'll pull up a live example and demonstrate for you. But basically, you go up to the top left, there's an icon for a pen, you click on Add Signature, and then click on Draw. You use the computer mouse to draw your signature, and then it's just a drag and drop to put that signature on the signature line. When you save it, then to pass it along to the next person for them to sign, it's important to use the Save As function. If you use Print to PDF, the ability to sign using the computer goes away. So use the Save As function, and then the next 2 individuals will follow the same steps to add their signatures. And then you can email that completed copy to elainem@psu.edu. So again, regardless of the option you use, be sure that all the fields on the signature page for all 3 individuals are completed except for that signature field. And we're asking this because this helps ensure that we can read the email addresses in particular and the other information from your submitted application. So let me see if I can just pull up quickly. So hopefully, can you see that, Elaine?
Yes.
You can. Okay, good. So here's an example of the last page where everybody's information is filled in here: name, title, email address, and date. The only thing missing are these signature blocks. So if you, again, want to use this, this unofficial but allowable way of signing, you just click on the pen. I guess I already did my little fake signature here, but here's where you would click. And I'm kind of sad that I already did this, so now you're seeing this one. But anyway, when you click on that, you click Add Signature, Draw, and you use the mouse to sign it, and then this drag and drop comes up. And here I'm Jeff Smith here, so I'm going to just drop my signature there. So, and then you can just go up and click Save As, and then save it to your computer, and then you can email it to the next person. Okay, so this is an important one. So what are common weaknesses on applications? So based on the earlier rounds of applications, we wanted to share feedback from reviewers regarding common weaknesses in unfunded applications to help you submit a strong application. So one noted weakness was that some proposed activities were not likely to result in significant increases in school breakfast participation. Applications that proposed to add a new alternative service method or were a clear expansion of an existing alternative service method scored higher than applications that propose less robust projects. For example, adding smoothies in the cafeteria could increase participation, but we would expect greater impact from a plan to add a grab and go cart in a busy hallway that will also offer the smoothies. Your plans should be sustainable beyond the grant timeframe. Reviewers like to see that the school has thought through the steps of their plan and how they'll be able to continue their efforts after the grant period ends. Reviewers noted that some plans included little detail and weren't descriptive enough to judge quality. So do keep in mind that the reviewers do not know anything about your current breakfast service method or situation at your school. So be sure to clearly describe how what you're proposing is a change from your current practices at the school. Some of the plans for improving the nutritional quality of school breakfast were weak, non-existent, or narrowly focused. Reviewers were interested in plans that addressed multiple aspects of nutritional quality mentioned in the application and in all areas of breakfast service if possible. So if you have traditional breakfast service and are adding a grab and go cart, a stronger application will discuss how the nutritional quality and menu items offered both in the cafeteria and through the grab and go option will be improved. A plan for incorporating multiple menu strategies, again, like we've talked about, things like reducing prepackaged items that are high in sugar or sodium, an effort to serve more protein sources, fresh produce, whole grains, offering more hot foods, and incorporating new breakfast recipes. These are the things that will demonstrate a commitment to improving the nutritional quality and appeal of breakfast meals. Be sure that everything that is included in your budget is clearly described in the application and that the budget does not include unallowable items, including items that were purchased prior to awarding the grant. All right, so that concludes my presentation, and now is a time for those of you who have any questions. Go ahead and type them in the chat box, and Elaine and I will do our best to answer those.
Thanks, Jenny. We did have a question in the chat that I just wanted to reiterate. There have been questions about the slides, the availability of the slides. So again, they will be available on the School Breakfast Expansion Grant portion of the Project PA website within about 48 hours. Again, please use the Q&A box to submit your questions. We do have one that is, if we have a food sponsor and get awarded the grant, what is the process for the required menu to be uploaded to Primero Edge? Would we still do that? That isn't something we've done before.
So we have had some schools, some awarded schools that work with a vendor or a food service management company that doesn't choose to use Primero Edge as their nutrient analysis software. And we have been able to work with them. Usually those other, usually they can provide a login for me so I can go in and access their menu cycle. And they just, let me know where to get the reports. So essentially what we're doing, we're looking at the same two reports that we would look at during an administrative review. Of course, these are not for administrative review purposes. I want to be clear about that. This is just, as I said, to look at how your menus changed from before you implemented your project until the end of the project. So we're looking at things like how much sugar is in your menu, sodium, how much juice you're offering. There's a number of things that we're looking at. So we have been able to, again, work around this, where if you give me that login, I've gone into other nutrient analysis software and have been able to get those reports.
Okay, do you have to do both an alternative service model and the improved nutritional component, or is just one okay?
That's a great question. So both of those grant objectives need to be included in your project. So you'll be describing how you plan to expand school breakfast, improve participation by expanding or implementing a new breakfast program if you don't already have it. And again, we strongly encourage you for a strong application to either implement a new alternative service method or expand one that you currently have in the school. So that's for that first objective. The second grant objective also needs to be part of your project, which is, how do you plan to try and improve your menus to do things like, bringing down the amount of sodium, bringing down the amount of added sugars, offering more hot foods, things like fresh produce, more whole grains, basically the kind, and those are the things that we'll talk about in that for awarded schools. We go over some different ways that you can do that. But for those of you who aren't menu planners who are on the call, a lot of times making small tweaks in your menus can make a big change because it's multiplied by all the students, taking those meals. So sometimes just choosing a lower sodium breakfast sandwich compared to the one you're using now, one that's multiplied by, 100 students, that can bring down that sodium level in your menus over the week, for example.
Thanks, Jenny. We don't have any questions in the Q&A box anymore. We did have an attendee with her hand raised, but I'm not seeing it anymore. But if you did have a question, either type it in the Q&A box, or if you want to raise your hand again, I'll try to unmute you. You can just wait a few minutes maybe to see if any questions come up.
And as I mentioned there, I know, when I'm on webinars like this, I think of questions later that come to mind. Again, check that FAQ document. This is our third round that we're offering. So we have added to it, as we've learned more through the process of this grant and questions that have come up. So definitely check that out. And if you're not finding the answer to a specific question, do reach out to Elaine and me, and we'll be happy to help you out.
We do have another question, Jenny. Would we be able to use this grant for a vending machine?
So a vending machine that dispenses reimbursable breakfast meals is something that you could write the grant for. Again, the important thing is that you explain how this will expand, why you want or need this vending machine to reach more students, to expand school breakfast, why you think that would work, and how also you plan to overall increase or improve the nutritional quality and the appeal of your breakfast menu.
Okay, would the increased food costs related to the nutritional component be allowable?
So the food that you purchase for reimbursable breakfasts is not an allowable cost for the grant. So we have been asked this question before, more nutritious foods sometimes cost more. So can we use grant funds to sort of subsidize those costs? The answer is no. Food for the reimbursable breakfast meal is not an allowable expense. What you can use funds for are things like, food that you purchase for taste testing. We've had schools that have done trainings to, like a culinary training maybe for the staff at their school to learn how to make some new scratch or speed scratch menu items, and then do some taste testing. So the food for those purposes would be an allowable expense, food that's part of a training or part of a taste testing. But food itself for the reimbursable meal is not an allowable expense.
Not seeing additional questions at this time. If you don't mind, Jen, I'll just add one just to reiterate something that you've already stated, but it's one of the problems that we sometimes have seen, and that is in that minimum budget amount. As Jenny mentioned, we're not considering applications that request less than $5,000. So that's something we try to check quickly as grants come in and let you know, if you've submitted a budget that's not allowable, we'll get back to you, but you don't want to find yourself on October 18th submitting a budget under 5,000 and then having us tell you that you need to revise that in order to make it allowable. Can you give us an example of what some people are doing?
We've seen a variety of things. I would say that most applicants, most awardees are expanding or initiating a new alternative service method. So a lot of the equipment and supplies that we see are related to that. So folks are purchasing a new or maybe a much better hallway cart or kiosk that they can use at their school. Sometimes they are wanting to purchase equipment so that they can offer hot foods from the cart. Maybe they just had a really simple grab and go cold items, and only the students who go to the cafeteria can get hot foods. So maybe they've requested equipment so that they can serve hot foods or keep foods hot at the hallway cart or kiosk. Again, insulated bags to keep cold foods cold, hot foods hot, for transport, for alternative service methods. We have seen folks wanting to start a smoothie program as part of their expansion and increasing the nutrition. So equipment for that, sometimes the giant immersion blenders. Fresh fruit slicers is another one as a way to offer more fresh fruit that's cut up, since students like having easy foods to eat that are easy for grab and go. So sliced fruit is a plus, and more fresh fruit. I'm trying to think what else, Elaine, that
I think you've covered it pretty well.
Yeah. Oh, and again, that, sometimes if it's brand new or expanding, sometimes folks need like the iPads, the equipment to do the point of service from remote locations in the school. That's another thing that we see. Chef knives again. Again, the training, if you wanted to bring in a chef to do a training with your staff, that could be an allowable cost. So, and folks, again, things like making changes to the menus doesn't necessarily cost anything, but really just taking that time to look through the menus and, looking at places where maybe you can choose a lower sugar breakfast cereal, or eliminate some of those higher sugar prepackaged things like toaster pastries or cinnamon buns or whatever, and finding a lower sugar option are other examples of things included in schools projects.
Okay, can we use funds to pay for extra labor time to serve students at a kiosk?
So this is where we come into that short-term labor cost versus an ongoing labor cost. So what that sounds like to me is that the school doesn't have, the school is looking for, putting in a kiosk, but doesn't have the funds or the ability to staff the kiosk, and they would be using for the grant for that, or they would be using grant funds for that. And the trouble that comes in with that is it's not really a short-term labor cost to get you started. It's more of a long-term cost. And the question would be, how are you going to sustain that kiosk later on when the grant funds run out? So I would encourage you to see if you can find ways to, move folks around, or, some other way where you wouldn't be completely relying on grant funds to pay for a new person to come in and staff that cart, so that you can continue that in a sustainable way after the grant ends.
Can the cost of fresh fruit be used as an allowable cost. I can take this one, Jenny, I'll give you a break. So it can't be used as an allowable cost if the fresh fruit is part of the reimbursable school breakfast. If you wanted to do taste tests to try to determine what types of fruit students might be interested in, you want to do some sampling, that is an allowable cost, but the cost of fruit or any food that is part of a reimbursable meal is not allowable. Not seeing additional questions yet. Okay, it looks like maybe there are no additional questions. You do have both mine and Jenny's email address on the screen. Please feel free again to reach out to us at any time with any questions. And again, the slides, the FAQ document, and the webinar recording will be available on the Project PA website within about 48 hours. So thank you all for joining us this morning.
Thanks, everybody.